This time on Psychic Investigators. A swimming instructor is found stabbed to death in a quiet Florida town.
Someone couldn't have walked out of it that wasn't covered with blood.
But the case is going nowhere, fast.
There was no physical evidence to arrest him.
Until a psychic claims to see the killer.
It's just a disgusting crime of extreme terror.
But are his visions enough to crack the case?
He says, the killer's nearby, the killer's nearby.
(1977), Boynton Beach, Florida, an hour north of Miami. A quiet coastal town where people escape the troubles of everyday life. Violent crime generally happens someplace else. It's August, and Mae Wentz, a part-time swimming instructor, has run into trouble with her neighbors. Mae, unmarried and living alone, has a habit of leaving her door open for her beloved German Shepherd, Duke.
She would let her dog run loose and became a problem with the town. The neighbors complaining about dumping garbage cans and so forth.
By August 5th, her neighbors are so fed up, they report the dog. Duke is caught and taken to the pound. Days go by, and neighbors expect to see Mae looking for her dog, but there's no sign of her. Duke has been left stranded. Finally, on Sunday, August 7th, a worried neighbor checks in and smells a strange odor coming from the bedroom and immediately calls the police.
Mae Wentz was lying on the floor next to the bed. She had been stabbed.
Sergeant John DiBattista was the first on the scene.
There was a lot of blood all over the bedroom, on the walls, on the bed, on the floor.
Lieutenant Ed Hillary is the lead investigator in the case.
There were two pieces of a knife at the crime scene. One was the point of the knife, and then one was a broken part of the blade. We never found the handle.
Aside from this, the killer has left little evidence.
We were able to lift several latent fingerprints, but they were subsequently identified as belonging to Mae Wentz.
From the state of decomposition, police determine how long Mae Wentz has been dead.
We had a possible time span when the crime occurred, and that was 2 to 3 days.
But this only makes things harder for the police. It's the first 48 hours that are the most crucial in any murder investigation, and those hours are gone. Adding to the mystery, nothing in the house seems misplaced, ruling out robbery as a motive. And the autopsy later confirms that there was no sexual assault. Her only enemies, it seems, are feuding neighbors.
We had no reports of cars leaving the area quickly or anything like that, so we had the feeling, with the blood all over the walls, someone couldn't have walked out of it that wasn't covered with blood. If they went any distance, possibly someone would see him. We figured it was somebody nearby.
With little evidence, the detectives have their work cut out for them. The police contact Mae's family in New Jersey with the news.
I was shocked. There were all kinds of questions running through your mind that, what could have happened? Who could have done this?
The very concept that there might be someone out there randomly attacking women is always alarming to the community.
Laura Belgrave covered the story for the local paper.
I think the community felt fear and something of an anxiety for it to be solved. It was a woman brutally murdered in the kind of fashion that in particular scares all women. And because no one knew who the killer was, you have to worry, is there some crazy out there? Is this someone who could break into my house? She was just an everyday person.
Over the next few days, the police learn more about the 41-year-old swimming instructor.
May was a kind and gentle and quiet person. She had a lot to give to people. She was very active with her swimming lessons. I would go up maybe every few weeks and we'd go out water skiing or just go down to the beach. It was good times.
As the police dig deeper, the mystery widens.
You ask 10 different people about May Wentz and they'll give you 10 different answers.
She didn't get along very well with neighbors. Not to the extent that, there was altercations or anything like that, but a lot of verbal stuff back and forth. They'd get a lead and they'd say, this is it, we're going to, and it would peter out. It was difficult. It could have been anybody.
But two neighbors do stand out from the crowd. Brothers Daryus and Jerry Mills both have a long history with local law enforcement. They live directly across the street from May Wentz.
They had been involved with Boon Beach Police Department on several different occasions. Drunken, disorderly, fighting, and things like that.
With no other leads, police decide to check them out. Detective DiBattista conducts a voice stress analysis, a test similar to a lie detector. It measures psychophysiological stress responses in the human voice.
The voice stress analysis that I performed on Jerry, I asked him several questions, and he showed deception, he showed stress on several of the controlled questions. And it was my opinion that he had knowledge of the homicide. As far as Daryus Mills goes, he didn't show deception.
Based on the interviews, Detective DiBattista suspects Jerry Mills knows more than he's saying, but his hands are tied.
There was no physical evidence in which to arrest him.
All you got was sort of a floating, well, that week I might have done this or I might have done that. I was drunk, I got in a fight. That's the kind of stuff you'd get from them, but nothing you could pin them down with as to where they were.
Weeks go by, and the May Wentz case is slowly going cold. By a strange twist of fate, the National Enquirer is holding a psychic demonstration in Boynton Beach. The chief of police has been invited, but he tells Detective Ed Hillary to go in his place.
I said, you got to be kidding. I said, you want me to go see a spoon twister? He says, yeah, I want you to go up there for me because I promised him I'd be there.
Before Ed left, I said, Ed, why don't you talk to the psychic? Maybe we can get him to take a look at the May Wentz case. Ed wasn't very happy when I asked him about that, using black magic to solve homicides. But we had no physical evidence to go on. It had worked in the past. Let's try it.
At the demonstration, Detective Hillary meets with well-known psychic Phil Jordan and learns he's also deputy sheriff in his hometown of Ithaca, New York.
My psychic insights with police investigation are to perceive impressions about a crime that ordinary investigation has not been able to come up with.
The fact that he had been used to find people that were lost, find bodies, that impressed me.
The detective invites Phil Jordan to the station to look into the case. But will his psychic insights help to solve the brutal murder of May Wentz?
She's trying to fight. There's blood spattering all over.
41-year-old May Wentz is found stabbed to death in her Boynton Beach, Florida home. 4 weeks have passed. The killer is still at large. With no hard evidence and dwindling leads, detectives turn to psychic Phil Jordan for help.
And I had all the files here to give him. He said, no. I don't want to touch that. I don't want to know anything about the file. Just give me a picture.
As I looked at the picture of May Wentz, I began to perceive a lot of different things. I felt her to be a very independent woman. I felt she was a good person, but very much an individual, very much to herself. I see that she's a twin. I see a pink house. I began to sense things about the murder itself. And I see them violently stabbing Mae Wentz.
Phil Jordan is dead right about the way Mae Wentz died.
From not knowing anything about it, told us that she was stabbed. It was pretty amazing.
Even more astounding, Mae did have a twin, her sister Loretta.
The fact that he knew that there was a twin before we did certainly impressed me.
The police are also intrigued at the mention of a pink house.
They took me to the scene of the crime. They told me that this was the house the crime occurred in, and I was taken back a bit because I perceived the house to be pink in color.
As it turns out, the house was pink.
We noticed right away that the house was a different color because the owner of the house had repainted it after it was cleaned up, and I guess he was getting ready to try and rent it or sell it.
I immediately felt I had to go in the house because I believed that's where the crime did occur. I had an eerie feeling about the bedroom. I stood in the doorway and I began to sense things. I see a person. I see him coming into the house. I see that he's wearing a brown uniform. I see Mae Wentz. And I see the crime beginning to be created. She's trying to fight. She was aware of who was doing it. And I see him stabbing her with a knife. Her body's being punctured with that knife. There's blood spattering all over. You actually feel the knife penetrating your own being where it penetrated her being. And then as the chaos continued, I realized that the tip of the knife was broken off. It hit a part of her body or a bone that broke the tip of the knife right off. Then I feel the need to get out of there. Something's drawing me to the outside. The person that committed this crime was close.
Phil walked across the street and he stopped.
It's almost like a suffocating feeling of fear or paranoia overcomes you.
He says, my God, the killer's nearby, the killer's nearby.
And he's looking right at the Mills brothers' house. That really got me.
Now I'm becoming a believer because we never told him that the Mills residence was where we had suspects. It was kind of creepy.
The psychic's revelations seem to confirm what the police already suspect, that one of the Mills brothers killed Mae Wentz. But where is the rest of the broken knife?
I immediately asked myself, where would the handle of the knife be? The thing that kept coming to me was under a boat, under a boat. Where is the boat? The boat is where the perpetrator of the crime lives.
John and I both looked at the backyard looking for this boat.
But they find nothing. Phil Jordan returns to New York, leaving the police to figure out the meaning of the brown uniform and the boat.
Driving back in the car, John and I were looking at each other and say, this guy's on point with things. Let's tell the guys that we possibly should be looking for someone in a brown uniform, maybe a delivery guy. find out if we can develop any suspects in the area.
Intrigued by the psychic's vision of a boat, the detective has an idea.
John says, you know what we're going to do? We have to look at those aerial photographs.
As far as aerial photographs, that's a standard operating procedure, any homicide. For the crime scene investigator to go up and take aerial photographs of the neighborhood. We went back to headquarters. The first thing we did is we checked the photographs, and we found a boat.
Phil Jordan was right. There was a boat at the Mills residence. Could this be where the murder weapon was thrown on the night of the crime?
On the day the photographs were taken, that was just shortly after the event. When Phil came, there was no boat behind the house. It had been moved.
Although the police now have evidence that there was a boat, they can't get a search warrant on the word of a psychic.
We had no reason to go on the Mills property because, you needed probable cause, and we had no probable cause.
But now, there's another twist.
Investigation brought to light that Daryus Mills worked for a landscaping company that wore brown uniforms.
Is this the brown uniform that Phil Jordan claimed to see? Prompted by the psychic's remarkable visions, Mae Wentz's neighbor, Daryus Mills, is now the prime suspect. But without any concrete evidence, how can the police prove he is the killer? A small Florida town is gripped in fear when a swimming instructor is brutally murdered in her home. With the help of psychic Phil Jordan, police now have a prime suspect in their sights, but they can do nothing.
In any murder investigation, you're going to have to be able to tie the victim and the perpetrator together. You got to have some physical evidence or eyewitness or something.
It's very frustrating that you can't make an arrest. When you know deep down that somebody committed the crime.
Sergeant DeBattista and I were particularly bummed out by this because we had a perfect record. It was a thing of pride also for us. And we were working real hard on it. That's the part that hurt, was we wanted to continue that record. We wanted to get this bad guy off the streets, and we just couldn't get it done.
The detectives believe Daryus Mills is the killer. But with no proof, the case slowly goes cold.
The investigation continued for several months till everything just sort of ran out. It was looked at less and less and less. Over 3 years, it had petered out to the point where it was a cold case until it just went away. But it didn't go away in our minds, I'll tell you that.
The community really wanted an end and a resolution to the Mae Wentz case. There was a loss that shouldn't have been. And when you go and you see a neighborhood where this has taken place, for example, it's changed somehow. It's almost in the air.
Mae's family continues to pressure the police for answers.
As a family member, you don't want the police to stop. You want them to spend every minute of the day on solving that crime. If this happened again, who would be to blame?
Over the years, psychic Phil Jordan stays in touch with detectives from his home in Ithaca, New York.
Though the investigation is cold, the psychic impressions are the same whether they would be 3 years or 23 years. You become so involved in the case that you actually feel a part of the case. And I was sure that Daryus Mills was the person involved with the crime.
But the case gathers dust on the shelf for 3.5 years, until the police unexpectedly catch a break. On March 9th, 1981, Daryus Mills is brought in on burglary charges. Police call Phil Jordan to let him know.
When I have a case where we have somebody in custody, I would either do prayers that they would turn themselves in or confess to the crime. That doesn't always have to be verbally done. That can be done just through concentrated effort and thought.
Daryus is incarcerated in the county jail. In the middle of the night, he woke up screaming and hollering. The jailer went to him. He says, "I killed a woman in Boynton Beach." He says, "I killed her. I killed May Wentz."
Daryus Mills tells police that voices in his head urged him to confess to May Wentz's murder. On the night of August 3rd, 1977, Daryus Mills says he went to May's house looking for sex. He claimed they had a one-night stand a few years earlier. Since she always left her door open for the dog, Daryus had easy access to the house. He had a knife. He woke her up. They started to fight. Daryus choked her and stabbed her until the knife broke. He then fled the house with the handle and threw it in his backyard.
Some of the stuff he said is just tremendous. No question about it. It was on point.
The fact that the knife had been thrown by a boat, and the fact that he knew the gentleman had a brown uniform, he lived in the neighborhood close by. I mean, these weren't things that he was just kind of guessing at.
Daryus Mills is convicted on second-degree murder charges. He is later diagnosed with schizophrenia. But could the voices that prompted Daryus Mills to confess be something else?
For me, the power of prayer is one of the strongest energies and strongest powers in the world. And I like to believe that that does have strong significance. And I believe in this case it did.
You almost have to believe in psychic power. You know, it really can't be denied.
You know, I'm not going to rule anything out. Apparently it worked.
Some people believe that psychics are fakes or phonies, but I believe that some people do have a gift or a power to be able to foresee things or visualize things.
Whatever prompted Daryus to confess, the killer is now behind bars.
Nothing is worse for an investigator than to leave an open case. I was very relieved.
That made us feel good. Bad guy zero. That's the way we felt. Having interfaced with a psychic, I was impressed. As a chief, would I talk to my investigator who's hit the wall? Yeah, I'd tell him to try a psychic.
It works. If they can help you solve a case, I think it's well worth trying.
May Wentz's family can finally begin to find closure.
It puts a spot in your heart. You've lost something that's not going to come back, but maybe the process of this being over with can begin.
Grief stops our life. In a tragic death such as May Wentz, it's hard to continue from beyond that point, especially if there's unanswered questions.
This time on Psychic Investigators. When a local dentist is found brutally murdered in his home, everyone is shocked.
And I said, well, what's so bad that I can't go in? And they said, you really don't want to see this.
The police suspect his closest friends.
Now, all of a sudden, we're under a light for everybody to watch our every move.
Until a pair of psychic sisters share a disturbing vision.
I felt a lot of blood pooling around my feet, and I had a flash of a bat.
And all of a sudden, these spirit guides just screamed out, "Law enforcement."
Blairsville, Pennsylvania, an hour's drive from Pittsburgh. A factory town which once turned out the steel and glass that helped build America. This is small-town USA, where life is comfortable and safe. At least that's what everyone thought, until a spring day in 2006. On the afternoon of April 13th, a teenage boy makes a shocking discovery at his next-door neighbor's house.
He was so upset, and I'm like, what is wrong? What is wrong? I thought maybe Zachary got hurt or what have you. He's like, you have to come now. It's John. He's dead.
Melissa Yuse's neighbor is Dr. John Jelinek, a local dentist. She immediately calls 911.
When I walked up to the door, I saw there was blood on the outside of the door and the window. And right inside the foyer, there was blood all over the foyer, all over the walls, all over the floor.
In the living room, Leidig discovers a man's body lying in a pool of blood, his throat slashed from ear to ear.
Immediately, I knew that it had to be a homicide. No one could have done that to themselves.
Corporal Janelle Leidig has been with the Blairsville police for 6 years, but this is her first homicide.
It just looked like there was a violent struggle and there's just blood that went everywhere.
She immediately calls in the Pittsburgh FBI to help collect forensic evidence. Throughout the house, the killer has left a trail of blood.
There were footprints going out through the living room, through the dining room, out the back door.
The footprints may belong to the killer, but he's wiped his fingerprints clean. Investigators notice there is no sign of forced entry. Nothing of value appears to be missing. Jelnik's 4 guns, stored upstairs, remain undisturbed. Corporal Leidig verifies that the crime scene hasn't been contaminated.
Everybody who was on scene, I had them give me their shoes, and we made shoe prints of what they had on before I would even let them leave. And we compared them to the shoe prints that were found going through the dining room and kitchen, and none of them matched.
The victim's hands are bagged to preserve any trace evidence under his fingernails. As the crime scene is photographed, the police conduct an exhaustive search of the victim's house and neighborhood in hopes of turning up more clues.
We sealed off the area as far as you could see or hear. And I had officers walk up and down roads, look in areas of like the grassy areas, the bushes everywhere, to see if we could find any kind of murder weapon. We searched the entire house, and we just were unable to find any type of murder weapon.
Outside, Blairsville is in a state of shock.
The word had already started to get out, and people were coming to find out what was going on.
One of those people is the victim's cousin, Mary Ann Clark.
And as I got to his house, I asked, I wanted to go in. And they said, you can't go in. And I said, well, what's so bad that I can't go in? And they said, well, he's been murdered. And you really don't want to see this.
Melissa Yuse, John's next-door neighbor, has been his friend since the 9th grade.
He was an awesome guy. He was an awesome father who loved his son very much. He was a good neighbor, and he also made a difference in our community.
John was probably the kindest, most gentle, generous, fun-loving person you would ever meet. If you met John, you loved John.
John Jelinek had recently moved back to the neighborhood after splitting with his wife of 9 years.
The divorce was a really bitter divorce. Every time they would get close to a settlement, Michelle always wanted something more.
Including custody of their 9-year-old son. But after 5 long years, Michelle and John finally agreed to a settlement.
John finally saw an end to this dark tunnel that he was going through.
But John never got a chance to sign the papers.
I don't think anyone in Blairsville had any idea that this could be anything other than random. There was no reason for John Yelenick to be murdered.
Jennifer Mealy follows the sensational story for the local television news.
That's when you saw the neighbors start to lock their doors at night, something they'd never done before, keeping their porch lights on and watching things a little more closely.
Living right beside John's house, my kids were terrified. We didn't sleep for, I bet, over a week. We were just so scared to be in our home.
In the days following the chilling crime, the police canvassed the area. A neighbor reports hearing 2 men fighting about money in the pre-dawn hours. This casts a new light on evidence found at the scene. Evidence pointing directly at the victim's next-door neighbors, the Uses, the family who first raised the alarm.
We were on the coffee table. We found a check that was made out from the Uses to Mr. Yelenick. They didn't want him to cash it yet. So Mr. Hughes was a suspect. He was, I guess, a person of interest is how we call it.
Police take the victim's neighbors in for questioning and grill them about the uncashed check.
I was going to open a bakery here in Blairsville, and John had given me $15,000 to help open my bakery.
But Melissa says he asked for the money back suddenly, saying he needed it to make a tax payment.
And I wrote him a check. I said, I only have $14,000 at this time, and then I'll get you the other $1,000 within the next couple weeks.
The police aren't convinced by the story.
Not only were we losing a dear friend of ours, but now we were actually being considered as somebody that could have done this horrible crime to him.
With her husband now a prime suspect, Melissa is desperate to prove his innocence. A month after the murder, she visits 2 psychic sisters in search of answers. Hosts of a regular psychic tea party, Suzanne and Jean Vincent claim to be guided by the spirits of the dead.
My psychic insights come to me in a variety of different ways. I start seeing flashes of light. I start seeing scenery and images.
I might hear or taste something that would all be symbolic to what is this person all about, or what is the situation all about.
And I also have a spirit guide who accompanies me during a psychic session. I see a picture of him that kind of emerges, kind of like a negative, and he gives me these images and these visions of the people that I'm trying to communicate with on the other side.
Melissa tells the psychic pair nothing about the murder.
And the first thing my spirit guide said to me was there was a grief cloud all around this lady. I just said, oh my goodness, your boys found a body? And she had said, yes, they did. The energy around her was saying that someone might even suspect her husband of doing this gruesome crime, of killing this neighbor.
I was just simply amazed on what they could see that was going on with our family.
The psychics have seen the murder of John Yelenick, but can they find his killer?
Melissa just kind of casually said, well, who do you think killed my neighbor? And all of a sudden, immediately, the spirit guides just screamed out, law enforcement.
When 39-year-old dentist John Yelenick is murdered, his neighbors become suspects. Desperate, they turn to a pair of clairvoyant sisters who say the real killer works in law enforcement.
I called Suzanne and Jean and asked them if they would be interested in coming to Blairsville to do a reading over in John's house.
They agree. 3 months after the killing, they visit the crime scene.
As I was going to the backyard, I was feeling a very strong pull that the person who had done this to John had parked in the back.
I had a vision of a maroonish, reddish SUV stalking John Yelenick's house.
Hoping that the psychics can help to solve his murder, John's family has given the group permission to enter the house. No longer a restricted crime scene, inside little has changed since the murder. Blood, though faded, is still visible.
I was immediately pulled to the dining room, and I looked right down, and I said, whatever happened, happened right here. The energy was very heavy and thick. I was seeing stab wounds. I had seen his neck like jagged and then a straight line. I also felt a lot of blood pooling around my feet.
Then, Jean claims to see the killer.
John's spirit had drawn me to a shoe print, and as I put my hand over it, I started seeing a person with red hair, someone with light eyes, fair complexion, freckles, and I had a flash of a badge.
And all of a sudden, spirit guides just screamed out, "Law enforcement."
John's saying, "He killed me."
Melissa is stunned.
I knew in my heart who I thought had committed this crime and how much it resembled that person. And the details were just overwhelming.
That person is Kevin Foley. He's been dating John Yelenik's ex-wife for 2 years. He has red hair and drives an SUV. And he's a state trooper.
He was already the person of interest because he was the boyfriend of John Yelenik's ex-wife. But the fact that he was a trooper made it difficult to believe that even somebody would do that. But it also made me think that he wouldn't have messed up and he wouldn't have left footprints. But once I got the psychic's information, we wanted to look into it a little bit more.
Police discovered that there had been bad blood between John Yelenik and Kevin Foley.
John Yelenik had frequent arguments with his ex-wife, Michelle. So John Yelenik and Kevin would have words, even to the point where the police were called.
The trouble is, Foley is a fellow officer, and they have to tread carefully. And their hands are tied while they await results of the blood and the DNA evidence.
That was taking the longest. It was like excruciating for not only the public, but for us.
In the meantime, analysis of the bloody shoe print has eliminated one suspect. Tom Hughes wears a shoe a full 3 sizes larger than the killer's.
It was a relief to know that Tom was cleared of being a suspect at that point.
Her family name cleared, Melissa wants police to meet with the psychics.
I was very skeptical of psychics, but I said I would go. I said I would, go down to the house and keep it in the back of my mind that maybe it would work, maybe it would help.
4 months after the death of John Yelenik, the Vincent sisters meet the Blairsville police at the murdered dentist's home.
They gave me information about a reddish-colored SUV. I was taken back. Kevin Foley drives a maroon-colored SUV-type vehicle.
As we were walking through the kitchen, John's spirit yelled out and said, "Pay close attention to the footprint." It appeared to me that it was an expensive running shoe, and also I could tell the size. It was like maybe a size 10.
There's no way they could have known that. Even if they got a tape measure, there's no way they could have known it because it was faded by then.
The psychics offer a prediction. The killer did leave evidence at the crime scene. Evidence they believe will be his downfall.
John Yelenik has DNA of the killer underneath his fingernails. And we told the police, you need to pursue this.
Would the long-awaited DNA results be the key to the case? Then, a final perplexing revelation.
Over the footprint, I had a flash of dog tags. Whoever had these dog tags helped kill John Yelenik. This person has a military background.
The psychics have given the police more to look into. But will their clues lead the police to the evidence they need to arrest one of their own? 4 months have passed since the murder of dentist John Jelinek. The police suspect a state trooper as the killer. Their suspicions are confirmed by 2 psychic sisters who offer more clues.
The psychics actually gave us things to work on, you know, the dog tags, the military, the SUV, and the footprints.
The psychics say their vision of dog tags means the killer has a connection to the military.
I was sort of skeptical about that, thinking that, yeah, they got the car right, they got the possible trooper right, but he wasn't in the military. He didn't have dog tags. We looked into it further, and indeed, he did have a military background.
The police ramp up their investigation into the state trooper and make a damning discovery.
We found video evidence from local gas stations that Kevin Foley was driving through town. He didn't have to travel through Blairsville to get back home, and yet he did.
Kevin Foley had means. He had motive. And now it's clear he had opportunity. But police still don't have enough hard evidence to make an arrest. And Foley's not talking. He's hired a lawyer.
We were unable to get to Trooper Kevin Foley. He was not cooperating with us. So we requested State Attorney General's office to step in and assist us in investigating the crime.
A local police department, like the Blairsville Police Department, does not have the resources or the manpower to investigate a murder for months or years on end. So it became quite apparent that they were going to need help. The concern was, should they call in the state police to investigate this, considering one of their prime suspects was a state police trooper? And that's why both the state police and Blairsville Police agreed that an independent agency needed to be brought in to investigate this, hence the Attorney General.
This is a very circumstantial case. This wasn't a case with a confession or with an eyewitness. So it had to be built piece by piece.
Deputy Attorney General Anthony Krastik brings some much-needed muscle to the case.
One of the key pieces of evidence in this case certainly were the bloody shoe prints. This was a shoe print made from a A6 Gel Creed or Gel Creed Plus between a size 10 and a 12.5.
Only 25,000 pairs were ever sold in America. Krastik learns that Kevin Foley owns a pair.
That company had a discount for officers. Kevin Foley was one of their best customers. He bought a lot of things from them, including the exact size and make that could have made those shoe impressions.
While there's mounting circumstantial evidence pointing to Kevin Foley, there's still nothing to place him directly at the crime scene. And then
the DNA results came back and showed that there was a match to Kevin Foley.
Kevin Foley's DNA had been trapped underneath his victim's fingernails, just as the psychics predicted. 17 months after the murder of the Blairsville dentist, the police finally arrest Trooper Kevin Foley.
There was shock throughout the community. Half the community didn't want to believe, couldn't believe, that a state trooper could actually commit a murder. The other half had no doubt it was him. This was a 1.5 year long investigation. Clearly, this wasn't going to be simple. This wasn't going to be an easy conviction. The preliminary hearing itself, where the police have to lay out all the evidence they have against the suspect, took hours. We weren't even sure it would get that far. We thought perhaps a judge might throw it out right there, but he didn't.
At the trial, prosecutors argue that Kevin Foley had ample motive.
The jurors found out that Dr. John Jelinek's divorce was just 1 day away from being finalized.
If that happened, Foley's live-in girlfriend, Jelinek's estranged wife, would lose $2,500 a month in support. And Foley had another motive.
He had it in his mind that John Jelinek was a bad man, a child molester.
During Yelnick's bitter divorce, his estranged wife made accusations. She even took John to court. Although he was cleared of all charges, Foley never stopped believing John was a monster.
Kevin Foley made no secret of his ill will towards John Yelnick. He just would tell anybody that John Yelnick was evil, should be killed, even asked one trooper to help him kill him.
The prosecution paints the jury a vivid picture of the events of April 13th. At around 1 a.m., Foley arrived at Yelnick's house and entered through the back door.
You know I'm here for. No one out here. Get out of my house.
Foley attacked Yelnick, slashing him in the face and chest. He pushed Yelnick's head through the front door window, nearly decapitating him in the process. The pathologist testifies it took up to 9 minutes for John Yelnick to bleed to death. Throughout the 8-day trial, Foley maintains his innocence. But on March 18, 2009, he's convicted of first-degree murder in the death of John Yelnick. He's sentenced to life in prison with no chance for parole. He is appealing the verdict.
He was the most wonderful person in the world. He died the most horrible death. And tonight, this is his night. We love you, John, and we miss you. We're never forgetting.
For John's friend and neighbor, Foley's conviction means an end to a nightmare. And she credits the Vincent sisters for their part in solving the case.
I believe that the psychics were helpful in this case. I felt like it was just incredible, the information that they knew. What we wanted to do from the very beginning was to make sure that we found out who did this to our friend and make sure that justice was served.
This time on Psychic Investigators. In Napa Valley, 2 young women are stabbed to death in their home.
Large amounts of blood, just horrendous.
A third roommate survives.
In a few minutes' time, my entire life was changed.
How could this happen in our Napa?
Police have the forensics, but no one to tie it to.
Who am I missing? Who did I forget? What am I overlooking?
A psychic says, look closer to home.
They knew this person. There was no question about it.
Napa Valley, the heart of California's idyllic wine country. A place of vineyards, breathtaking views, the good life, and if nothing else, a safe place to live. And then, Halloween 2004.
This is 911 emergency. What are you reporting?
Oh my God, we got attacked.
Who attacked you?
I don't know. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Most of my roommates got hurt. Oh my God. I think they're dying. I just want to die.
Do you know who might have done this?
Oh God.
When the police arrive at the house on Dorset Street, they find 2 women dead. The scene is so gruesome, a female officer feels ill and has to leave. More police descend on the house.
The homicides had occurred in the upstairs of the residence. As we approached the staircase, there was an enormous amount of blood.
Detective Kirk Primo was a 14-year veteran with the Napa Police Department. Not wanting to contaminate the evidence on the stairs, Detective Primo uses a ladder to get his first look at the carnage.
Large amounts of blood. Just horrendous.
A double homicide. Leslie Mazzara and Adrian Insomnia, both 26.
I always live by the rule of the crime scene's always at least twice the size as what it appears.
Outside the house, one of the first pieces of evidence Detective Primo finds is a pile of cigarette butts.
They didn't appear to be weathered. They didn't appear to have been there for a long time.
The lone survivor of the vicious attack is 28-year-old Lauren Mianza. The bedrooms of Adrian and Leslie are on the second floor. Lauren's bedroom is on the first floor at the back of the house.
I got a phone call, so I went into my room and took it, and I heard Adrian say goodnight, and that was about 10, I think. I went to bed about 11, and probably by 11:30, the house was pretty quiet.
By midnight, the young women are sound asleep.
I had never heard anything like it. I knew right away that it was something awful. And then I went to my door and stood kind of in the doorway under the stairs. I heard a male flying down the stairs. I figured I was next, not knowing what to do. I just ran into the backyard. I've never, ever felt that terrified, like I was in a horror movie. I thought I was going to die. It was quiet except for screaming. I heard him kind of leave the house. Adrian, which I knew was her voice, she'd stopped screaming, but she was calling out for help. There's blood everywhere. Adrian just lying down next to her bed. She was alive still, but she was, I could tell in her eyes, she was gone. I had never really seen someone die before. To the right of Adrian was Leslie lying face down in a pile of clothing. I just turned around and went down the stairs, and I called 911. In a few minutes' time, my entire life was changed. I'd lost my friends, my roommates, and I'd been left untouched.
The only one who lived to tell the tale, police turned to Lauren for answers. Who would want to kill her roommates? Leslie Mazzara had moved to Napa about 6 months ago and landed a job at the vineyard of Hollywood legend, Francis Ford Coppola.
Leslie was very, very outgoing and very spunky. I had never met anyone like her. Just warm and just Southern hospitality, everything. Guys really liked her. Everybody kind of was drawn to her.
Adrian Insomnia grew up in the area and was an engineer for the city of Napa.
Adrian was different. She was much more, she was mellow, very good friend to people, just very smart individual.
These girls were tremendously well-liked, had tons and tons of friends, very social. There was no obvious motive that stood out as to why this crime may have happened. This was not going to be an easy case to solve.
For days, crime scene investigators worked the house. The killer entered through a push-up window. There they find fibers and what they hope is his blood. Nothing appears stolen. He's left no fingerprints and no weapon. All the evidence is sent for testing.
Well, the first reaction from the community was just shock and disbelief that something like this could happen in our quiet little Napa.
Marcia Dorgan covered the story for the Napa Valley Register.
People were worried, they were scared. I mean, they didn't know if they had a serial killer out there running around.
But the police don't think the murders were random. They think this is a crime of passion.
A pattern of the blood evidence that was collected, the anger and aggression.
The autopsy results support their theory. Cause of death, multiple stab wounds.
Focus was that the killer may have been an acquaintance or someone known to Leslie, as Leslie did leave a more active social life.
Leslie just attracted males. She had a lot of men interested in her.
2 weeks later, the town of Napa holds a candlelight vigil for the 2 murdered women. Police methodically question hundreds of their male acquaintances, starting with their inner circle. But after 3 weeks, the police are no closer to identifying the killer.
Daylight savings had started, so our days were very short, unfortunately. So any darkness, I couldn't stand.
Lauren and I, from the day of this incident, we met or talked on the phone daily. Lauren was very eager and very helpful in the investigation and wanted to be kept abreast.
So much evidence to process and so many potential suspects, the police are overwhelmed. And then something unexpected. A friend of Lauren's makes an appointment with 2 LA psychics, Marty and Michael Perry.
Allie had called me to let me know she was going to see the Perrys, go have a reading with them. She said that she would call me afterwards and let me know how it went.
The Perrys work as a team. Marty, an artist, claims to sketch what the spirits show her.
It's almost like automatic drawing. I get images of the people on the other side, and very often I'll have artists on the other side work through me. I'm in control, but I'm not.
Michael claims to channel them.
A medium's purpose is to be the vessel through which a deceased person communicates to a living person without getting in the way. It's like conscious possession. I'm there with you, but I'm not.
Allie records the session and tells them nothing about the murdered women. Michael Perry appears to fall into a trance.
I have 2 people here. One says my first name is A. She took my party. They said their life was taken. I can feel stabs up here around my neck, or my neck's cut. Murder. They're saying murder.
Two young women are stabbed to death in their Napa Valley home, while a third roommate escapes. 400 miles away, a pair of psychics claim to receive messages from the spirits of the murdered women.
Michael got on the phone and he said, I need to speak with you. And we set up an appointment for a phone interview or reading.
Marty and Michael felt that they could possibly help out in our investigation. I told Laura that I was open for anything.
A month after the murders, a phone reading is arranged. Lauren takes notes while Michael and Marty Perry record the session. Marty allows spirits to guide her hand as she begins to sketch, while Michael enters a trance and establishes contact with the murdered women, Leslie Mazzara and Adrian Insomnia.
You know, she's the loudest one. She's the talker to me.
Michael had told me that Adrian was coming through more clearly. She had a very analytical mind. She was definitely on the forefront of everything, whereas Leslie kind of stood back.
She said you to say you'd be dead too. You understand?
Adrian knew that I had left the house. She would have not known I would have left the house unless she was already past and seeing things.
Michael claims to see the female police officer who first arrived at the murder scene.
She couldn't take it or didn't want to be in there. She left, didn't she? Is what she says.
When I heard that, I was very surprised, and I looked over to Kirk. I said, did that happen? And he said, yes. That kind of sealed it for me.
You know, I had goosebumps just like she did. Those were details that were not released. Those were details that were kept very private as to not inhibit the investigation.
All this time, Marty Perry has been sketching the face of a man.
I did ask the girls on the other side to send me an image of the perpetrator. The biggest feeling was the goatee. When I get facial hair, and I'm drawing it, I start itching all over the place, and that's what I was getting when I was drawing that.
After the session, they emailed it to me, and remember looking at it, it actually looked familiar. I wasn't sure why.
Could this be a portrait of the killer? Detective Primo adds the sketch to the case file in hopes it will trigger something.
This could be for real.
Perry's were interested in coming up and meeting with us in person, and so he definitely wanted to pursue that.
DNA results from the blood taken at the crime scene identify 3 people: Leslie, Adrian, and what police believe is the killer, a white male.
But these women were very popular women, and they had tons and tons of friends. Leslie had ties to so many different cities and states that they had to do all of that, and they just interviewed people.
Police ask all of the women's male friends to provide voluntary DNA samples.
There was several pools of individuals to be interviewed and to be sampled.
It wasn't just a local police department investigation. There were several state and federal agencies involved.
There was a lot of high and lows periods during the investigation when we felt that we might have somebody whose DNA was eventually going to come back and be a match to what we had. And then there was the lows when those didn't.
Over the next 6 weeks, DNA results eliminate suspect after suspect. Police are no closer to catching the killer.
We knew we had what it was going to take to link our assailant to the crime. It was just finding that assailant.
Looking for anything that might help to solve the case, the police meet with the psychic couple, this time in Napa. Michael Perry claims to connect once more with one of the murdered girls, Adrian.
I said to Lauren, "Who's Lily?"
Lauren can only think of Lily Prudhomme, Adrian's best friend.
They worked together very closely, so they knew each other well from that. Adrian, when I met her, lived across the street from Lily.
The two were so close that Lily had postponed her wedding so that she and Adrian could travel together. But what could Lily have to do with the murders?
There was no way that I even would second guess any Lily or anyone related to Lily being involved with this crime. It's something I completely dismissed. I didn't even write it down in my notes. Focus was more on Leslie. So anyone kind of on Adrian's side was not as heavily focused on. So there weren't a lot of flags going up at all.
Lauren felt just as I did that it was just Adrian's best friend and that it really didn't have any significance other than Adrian was trying to maybe get a message to Lily.
Maybe there are more answers at the house.
Lauren was clearly traumatized. You could see it.
Yeah, she didn't want to go to the house.
I quickly learned my limitations on what I could give and what I couldn't.
Even before the police officer and the psychics enter the house, Michael Perry claims to key into the crime.
I said, "Oh, there are blood splats that you found out on the porch." I said, "That's his blood." And he said, "Yes, we believe so." I said, "Oh, the window opened up and he climbed in through the windows and you found blue fibers on the windowsill." Kurt said, "Yes."
Inside, no evidence of that horrific night remains. Michael Perry goes straight upstairs.
I knew immediately which room it had happened in.
Michael ran his hand along the banister and it stopped and said that he believed the killer's blood had been located on the banister in these locations. And in fact, that is where it had been found.
So we stood in the room for a while, and of course there was nothing there. It had all been cleaned out. I remember saying to him, "You found one girl here and you found the other girl here, didn't you?" And he said, "Yes." Adrian was doing most of the communicating with me, and she told me that the other girl had been stabbed first, then attacked Adrian. She put up a big struggle.
Then, Michael Perry says what the police already suspect.
I strongly felt that it was someone they absolutely knew. There was no question about it in my mind that they knew this person.
He has one more message from Adrian.
She kept referencing a boyfriend.
months after the stabbing deaths of 2 young roommates in Napa, a pair of psychics give police a name they claim comes from the dead women themselves. The name Lily.
Adrian's best friend, Lily, who was engaged at the time to a gentleman by the name of Eric Koppel, had come over and done some work on the dryer at the residence. Eric Koppel's name had not surfaced. An interview actually had been done with Lily, his fiance, who was a co-worker of Adrian's.
The police have interviewed over 1,000 men, but not the 26-year-old land surveyor, Eric Koppel.
I added him to my checklist. He was the 11th item on the checklist to make contact with him, to do an interview, and obtain a voluntary DNA sample. When I first saw the picture of Eric, the first thing that stood out was the sketch that Marty and Michael had provided and how accurate it was, looking almost identical to Eric. It also put pieces together, such as what Lily meant.
Before he can interview Lily's boyfriend, Eric Koppel, Detective Primo is taken off the case.
My rotation to rotate out of investigations was about to come up. I created this checklist to which I passed on to the incoming detective. The list was never followed up upon, and Eric was never contacted.
The investigation inched along for nearly a year. Leads dried up, and no more tips were coming in.
Lots of community pressure, lots of community uncertainty, and the pressure was that we need to solve this.
And no one wanted answers more than Lauren Mianza.
I was fearful that it would just be forgotten about, I think, and become a cold case.
It was finally decided through the department that we would go ahead and reveal the brand of cigarette that had been collected and sampled DNA the night of the homicide. A rare brand, and one that had been introduced not long before the crime had occurred.
DNA on the cigarette butts matches the DNA of the blood found at the crime scene. Blood, the police believe, belongs to the murderer.
We didn't associate with any smokers. And then I stopped. I thought, you know, Lily smokes. And so does her boyfriend at the time. They smoked. So I gave them Eric Koppel's name.
September 22nd, 2005. The police released the distinctive brand of cigarettes to the media. Camel Turkish Gold. Eric Koppel's brand. 5 days later, accompanied by his now wife Lily, the quiet land surveyor turns himself in.
Was shocked at first, and then it kind of made sense. It didn't stick out, but he kind of just survived under large personality of Lily.
No one in the community, and especially people that knew him, thought that Eric was ever a suspect, let alone a killer.
Eric Matthew Koppel is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, lying in wait and using a knife.
He was fearful of losing Lily. He was fearful that Adrian was convincing Lily to leave him. And their wedding had been called off, and he blamed Adrian. Adrian and Lily had planned a trip to Australia together, and so he was just deathfully afraid of losing her. So his answer was, kill the one that's in the way of my happiness with Lily. Kill the problem.
On Halloween night 2004, Eric Koppel admits he drank heavily at a party, during which he quarreled with Lily. A few hours later, armed with a knife, he entered the house on Dorset Street through an unlocked window. He creeps upstairs, and at this point the sequence of the attack is only known to Eric. But in the end, Adrian and Leslie lay dying in Adrian's room after being repeatedly stabbed. Adrian was the intended target. It seems Leslie Mazzara may have died trying to help her friend.
Still today, I can speculate on why he didn't touch me, or, you know, he avoided my room. I'm not sure. Always be a question, so.
January 2007. More than 2 years after the murders, the quiet land surveyor faces the court.
Do you plead guilty or not guilty?
Guilty, Your Honor.
His wife, Lily, who the Perrys had named as key to the case, was there at his sentencing.
Eric, there is nothing in this world that you could do to make me love you less.
I am a broken man. A man splintered by penetrating awareness of my own potential for wickedness.
And it is ordered Eric Matthew Coppos to serve a life sentence without possibility of parole.
Finally, some closure for the family and friends.
I was just so thankful that there had been a resolution to everything.
After having gone through this and having the experience of working with mediums, don't overlook. They may be a very good asset to your investigation, and at least they may be a small piece to that puzzle that you're missing.
I felt Adrian was a very strong personality, a very determined girl, and that she was determined to put this guy away or do something about it.
And that's what we do this for, is to help heal people, help realize that there is another side, and that we don't die.
The first night when I was questioned, I asked, what do people in my situation generally do? And Kirk had said, people don't generally survive in this situation. They're usually killed too. The experience with the Perrys has given me a faith that after we pass, that we can still have a connection to the ones we've loved in this lifetime.